Welcome, savvy investors, to yet another live training session on our Savvy Investor YouTube channel. We have another great session today, specifically for those that have that ambition to wanting to become a full-time real estate investor. And if this is sounding like you guys, enter one in the chat to see who you guys are. I'm sure all of us have got that ambition. I know I did many moons ago as well. And it's very exciting. And for many of us investors, this topic can feel extremely unattainable right now, especially in this current economic climate. You know, you've got interest rates going up, cash flow. What is that? Cash flow? I don't even know what those are in this reality. It's becoming very minimal to non-existent. So how do you make this transition to becoming a full-time real estate investor? It can be very overwhelming. And to be honest, it's not really easy and requires a lot of work. And most importantly, a lot of planning and adapting. And which is one of the reasons why I've got our amazing guest speaker joining us all the way from Hawaii, hopefully sunnier than what it is here right now in Vancouver, Daniel Kong, to join us. And again, he made this transition. He's got an amazing story. I encourage you guys to follow him on his Instagram page. But at the end of the day, he was a software engineer and turned full-time real estate investor. And guess what? 3 years. Pretty impressive stuff. So this is our opportunity for us savvy investors to learn more about his journey, how he did this, again, some of the challenges he had to overcome, and also managing during these types of challenging times. So I think this is going to be a great discussion with Daniel. I'm very honored to have him join us and share some of his wisdom to help support us savvy investors in our community as well. So with that being said, this is a YouTube Live. Make sure you post your comments, your questions. We'll make sure that we do a response to you as quickly as we possibly can, especially for those that are watching the recording. So make sure you get those keyboards clicking, fully engage. And the more you engage, the more we all get a chance to learn from each other as well. And again, this is a YouTube Live. So if you haven't had the opportunity to do this, please subscribe to our Savvy Investor YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell. Give us that thumbs up as we try to grow our Savvy Investor channel. So without further ado, and to get to the topic at hand, I want to welcome our good buddy, Mr. Daniel Kong, to the show. How are you doing, Daniel?
Great, man. Thanks for the introduction, Mike. It's a little more than I deserve, but I appreciate you having me today.
No, it's great. So, you know, for us, Daniel, there's a lot of people, a lot of Canadians that are based on Savvy Investor, and a lot of Americans too. And for me, I've followed you. And so I've got lots of great feedback from you. But for those that don't necessarily know who you are, maybe you can share a little bit about who Daniel is and what a little bit about your story and what you do. So
sure, yeah. I mean, just in a nutshell, I'm a real estate investor from Hawaii. Started in 2019, and I was actually doing software development for like a long time before that. Read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you know, the magical book, and it kind of like blew my mind. Started just kind of dabbling in real estate investing on the side. Eventually built up enough passive income to replace what I was making at my software job by using the BRRRR strategy. And then once I had like the last negotiation was like negotiating with my wife to let me actually like leave my job. So that was the toughest negotiation of all. But once we finished that one, then I just been investing in real estate like full time since. Been like when we're flipping houses, we have like some rentals, some Airbnbs, and we're kind of dabbling in the multifamily and the commercial space right now. So yeah.
Very cool. So what you've done, and I'm sure you hear this constantly down being in Hawaii, and I know you're a speaker quite regularly in a lot of different podcasts and webinars and even more live presentations as well. For what you've done is a dream for many real estate investors trying to get out of their 9-to-5 job. And for me, that was many years ago too. I started making cash flow. That was my first aha moment. It's like, wait a minute, there's income going in my pocket. Maybe there's an idea associated with this. And so for me, my motivation was spending more time with my family and my kids. And so I got kind of two questions for you. Is number one, what was your motivation to transition to a full-time real estate investor? Obviously, being a software engineer, I'm sure you were doing well and stuff like that. Maybe you can share a little bit about what was the reasoning for you? What was your motivation to help make that transition?
I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It was just financial freedom. And I think before I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I honestly had like zero idea that the whole world of like passive income even existed. Like the whole concept of passive income to me was like, it was like Mars. Like I never even considered it, you know, just working I mean, like, yes, I was staying in my lane, graduated, got good grades, went to college. Right out of college, I was just working as a job and just kind of staying focused on like what on my job, my family. I mean, like things here and there involved in my church. But the whole idea of like passive income or financial freedom was like, wasn't even like on my radar. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
social media, maybe back then it was a little less. In 2019, I think it was Instagram was just kind of starting, and maybe it was like a couple years old, but it wasn't as prevalent as it was today. So, and I wasn't really on social media a lot back then too. So then I think like when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, the whole idea that actually you can like own rental properties, get paid while you're not working, and then actually like and just have the time to do whatever you want. Like that whole concept to me was amazing. I was like, hey, like how can I make this happen? That's how it all started.
Amen. And you know what? I think for those that are watching this and they're new to this, okay, read the book. Okay, read the book. And for most investors that have been doing this, that was kind of their first aha moment. You know, Daniel, that sounded like you too. For me, that was one of mine. Is like, I'm like, I just got to be able to do some of this stuff, right? And so, my part two to that question is, is making that transition, and it's not always easy. Like, to be honest with you. And first of all, how did you prepare mentally, other than trying to negotiate with your wife? Because that is true. I had the same problem, the same battle, right, with my wife too. I shouldn't say it's a battle. Toughest negotiation. You want to do what? But how did you prepare financially and maybe mentally for that transition? Because there's a lot of people that are doing this right now, and they may have a really good job, and they're just like, I don't know if I can make that leap of faith. So maybe you can share a little bit about how you made that leap mentally to make that transition. And then did you do any preparation financially before you did that as well?
That's a great question, I think. And a lot of people ask me this. It seems scary to leave your full-time job and go and shoot to a full-time real estate investor. But I mean, my story is very a little different, just because I think I had a little luck during like the 2000. It was like, I actually started like during the COVID years where like the market was just going up like crazy, right? And so in the 2.5 years or 3 years that we're investing using the BRRRR strategy, we actually made enough rental property income like passively to actually replace what I was making at my W-2. So then from a risk standpoint, financially, it wasn't like a big like risk, because we were generating more passively than what I was actually making in my W-2. And then like we made a bunch of money from a few flips that we did. And so we actually had a big savings. It's crazy. Like at the time I was making, like, honestly, I think when I first started my journey, I was making like 80 grand a year. I mean, Hawaii doesn't pay well as a software developer, I think. But over a couple of years that I was investing in real estate on the side, I actually got a couple of increases in my salary. I was making just a little over 6 figures, depending on the bonuses for the year. But it wasn't like a huge salary to replace like relatively for Hawaii, right? But during that time, I think I made like almost like over a year's salary in the investing side in cash. So I just had like a year's salary plus sitting in my bank account. Plus we're making more than what I was making on my monthly passive cash flow, was making more than I was making monthly. So it was almost like a no-brainer for me to quit my job and kind of go into real estate, because my job was actually holding me back from doing more real estate. So 40 hours a week on my job, and then like 40 hours a week on my real estate on the side. The 40 hours on the real estate side was like 10x what I was making actually at my W-2. So it was, from a financial standpoint, it was just like a no-brainer to kind of leave. It was just, my wife just wasn't comfortable, just because it just seems scary, because like the job is quote unquote like guaranteed, right? But then like the rental income, of course, you're gonna have some months where you have expenses, and like flipping, it seems like it's up and down. Like you wait, and the cash conversion cycle is just so long. So
and you kind of brought me back to some of my past, to be honest with you. Is you reference 40 hours a week at your job, and then 40 hours a week in your second job, right? And that's your real estate investing side. And so for a lot of people that are looking at this, is like, it's a lot of work, like to do that kind of in that middle, that transition period. Hey, like Daniel, it's like during that time when you're about to kind of take that little bit of leap of faith, you've got to really work your absolute butt off to make that happen. Would you agree?
100%. And I think I think you have to, if you want to do it like over a long period of time, you don't have to. So like if you want to take 10 years, 20 years to do it, you can do it casually, 10, 20 like hours a week, and just kind of let time and like appreciation, things like over time build up so you can get out over a long period of time. But if you want to do it quickly, then you have to kind of like really focus and have like a focused effort if you want to do like any kind of short period of time to leave your W-2, in my opinion. So.
Love it. Very good. And I like what you referenced to is, and I hope everybody's paying attention to this because it's really, really important. Just don't take a leap of faith. Just make sure you've got yourself kind of covered off, kind of like what Daniel's done too, as well as he made sure that his income was more than offsetting his full-time. So then that the transition was a little bit easier, and your discussion with your spouse will be a lot easier by saying that too. Right. So
there's also like no right or wrong way to do it. Right. So I know guys who have like, they call burn the bridges, right? Where they just like, they give themselves no other option. I think if you have a family or something like responsibilities, it's maybe not the best way, but let's say you're single, like if the worst case, you live in your car, like you don't care, you have mom and dad or those things, and there might be an option for you in that case. Just everybody has different kinds of risk tolerances and different, like, I guess, seasons or situations in life. But for me, I'm honestly like a very low risk taker. Like, it's funny, I'm an investor. There's a lot of risk involved, but I'm actually like very low as far as like, I don't like taking risks. I only like taking like guaranteed risks or things where like I know I'm gonna win. So that's just my personal preference.
Me too. I'm the same way. 100%. That's awesome. So let me ask you, when it comes to kind of making this transition, I would imagine you've done probably a little bit of research specifically on real estate investing to make the transition to full-time. What type of research did you do to say, hey, to transition this to kind of a full-time business, I need to do this, this, and this. And the second part to that, I would assume, and you referenced Burr a few times, was also the strategy. And so, with your research and in regards to, hey, if I want to be a full-time real estate investor, these are some of the things I need to do. And the right strategy to proceed with that was this. How did you kind of come to that conclusion to make that transition? Because as you know, there's Burrs, there's fix and flips, there's commercial multifamily, single family buy and hold. There's a million strategies out there. What made you choose the strategy that you've done, and what was the research to kind of associate that to make that transition?
So when I first started the whole journey, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was like, this is amazing. And so I was just super hungry for knowledge. So I just try to read every real estate book and reread listen to every podcast that I could get my hands on. And so the first like 5 books I read were all Bigger Pockets books. I think it was like the book on rental property investing by Brandon Turner. So the first book was Rich Dad Poor Dad. The second book was on rental properties, and that played a huge role in my idea of what real estate investing was. And then I was a big fan of the Bigger Pockets show, so podcast. And those guys they preach Burr like day and night, right? You look on the forums, there's cash flow, Burr. And so it was almost like a little mini religion, right? You're just like, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and it's ingrained in your head, like, okay, the Burr strategy and like rental properties is like the way to go. And so it was just like, I just focused 100% on like doing Burrs, trying to build my cash flow. And like, as a result, it's just that's where kind of like all my focus went. And so like just consuming like all the content on how do you invest. And initially I didn't have any money. So I was like, yeah, I can't Burr in Hawaii because number one, the price points are too high. And number two, it doesn't cash flow after like your mortgage and like your rent. And so I was okay. So like all the guys are investing out of state in the Midwest. And so I read David Green's book, How to Invest Out of State, long distance real estate investing. And then I literally just followed whatever the book said to do, like on the things. And then like, let's ask questions on forums and just started investing in Indianapolis. So that was kind of like how I first started investing in like out of state. And in the beginning, I said like I didn't have any money. So what I did was I had a 401k. So you can actually borrow from your 401k with no penalty. So I think the max is like 50 grand. You can borrow 50 grand as a loan. You have to pay it back monthly over the next like 5 years, but at least you have access to some cash. And then I did this thing called like a personal line of credit. So like in a personal line, normally people know like HELOCs, you can take lines of credit against your house. But what a little known thing is you can actually take a personal line of credit, which is like $10, $15, $20, or $30,000 at a bank. And it's unsecured, where it's not tied to like real estate or anything. It's just tied to you personally are liable to pay it back. And so I went to like 5 banks in one day and just applied for personal lines of credit for all of them in Hawaii. So like the one after another, I think I got like $10, $15, $20, $30,000 each on personal lines of credit on all the banks. And then so I got like basically $100-something thousand in the personal lines of credit, plus 50 grand from my 401k. So now I just had money that I would have to pay back, but I had money to kind of play with and start the whole journey. And so from there, I just started burning in Indianapolis using that seed money. And then that's kind of just snowballed the way the whole thing until we got enough passive income to kind of like replace what we were making at as my software developer job.
Yeah, so you kind of were putting all the bricks in place before you were
Yeah.
making that transition, because as you know, and we'll talk about that in a second, is financing. For whatever reason, banks like jobs. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
for what, and so it becomes really difficult to try to ask the banks for loans when you don't have a job. And so that's something you guys all take into consideration with that. So we'll get to that as well. So that's really, really great insight. Really good. I know for myself, as part of some of my risk tolerance and some of the strategies that I used personally is making sure that I had a cushion in all my deals. Like I always want to make sure I had equity from the very beginning. Properties had to generate some type of cash flow just to protect myself no matter what. And again, it's not always guaranteed, but it's trying to find those things that find the right fit. And for me, it was buy and hold. Like, Burr, I always joke around, but not really, is, when it comes to the Burr strategy, I'm not a tradesperson by any means. The best tool that I have in my tool chest is actually my checkbook, because I just really suck at all of that stuff, to be very blunt. I call myself a lazy investor, but for me, I'm a buy and hold person myself. And for me, my strategy was always about have equity from the very beginning, and always generating cash flow. And so that was kind of my strategy as I started to look at doing some of my market research for going full-time as well. So great perspective, Daniel. Thank you so much. So you talked about Burr, and you've referenced Burr a few times. You also at the very beginning highlighted some of the strategies, maybe getting into multifamily. Maybe you wouldn't mind, over the last 2 to 3 years, has that changed a little bit? Are you still just focusing on Burr? And then at the same time, have you found an adjustment in your transition, or have you adjusted strategies, and maybe some pros and cons that you've identified, especially in this type of environment that we're dealing with today?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think as an investor, it's a constant like journey, as far as just like you're trying to evolve and get better and better, right? And so when I first started, it was no money. I didn't have anything like that, but very limited resources. So I could only buy like these $50,000, $70,000 houses in Indianapolis. And so that was where my first journey started. So it was a very like small cash flow. You get like $100, $200 a door, and like they're very like low price points. Eventually, I built up enough like skills and enough resources and enough like know-how to start doing like Burrs in Hawaii. And so like the Hawaii Burrs are, as opposed to like a $50,000, $70,000 purchase, now you look at $500,000, $700,000 purchase, right? So like the price points go up, but also the profit and the equity that you're getting, as well as the cash flow. And so the transition was from like the small singles to like a little bit bigger singles in Hawaii. Yeah. The one challenge in Hawaii is it's very hard to Burr, because you need a ton of equity, and it's very hard to cash flow on the back end. So you kind of have to have like either Airbnb or multifamily exits in order for it to make sense on the cash flow side. So then, the skill set to Burr is the exact same skill set to flip houses. It's just on the back end, you're either going to refinance it or sell it. And so the same skill set we were doing to find deals and then renovate them in Hawaii, now we just started selling them instead of as opposed to keeping them, because it doesn't cash on the back end. So we actually started like little singles in Indianapolis, and started to do like a little bit bigger singles in Hawaii, and then just started to like flip houses to kind of generate income. And then it was just like me by myself doing like the solopreneur. Right? I was doing everything. I was finding the deals, like raising money, like managing the contractors and all this stuff. And then eventually I was like, hey, like let's actually build a small team or trying to like part these things out, right? So over the next year and a half, I just started to like build a team in place. So now we have like a team that's actually like doing the flipping for us, and like we're kind of just like overseeing and kind of managing and things, but like it's actually like an active business. So it kind of transitioned from almost like real estate investor to small business owner, because now you have employees, now you have things, and so we have like a little money generating machine, just using the same skill set, the same things that I was learning in like when I was an investor, but now like we're flipping houses in Hawaii. And then like it's just what's the next level, right? So like in Hawaii, you make $100,000, $200,000 a house. You're kind of capped as far as like what you can make at the end of the year. But we're trying to get to the next level. So how can we generate like as opposed to like a 7-figure business, how can we get to 8 figures or 9 figures or beyond, right? So just the bigger the opportunity, the bigger like the bigger the opportunity, like the bigger the profit. And so like multifamily and commercial properties to us seem interesting, because as opposed to buying like a $1 or $2 million house, now we can buy a $10 million, $20 million house. Just the price points are bigger, the profit's bigger, the cash flow is bigger. And so we're kind of transitioning into multifamily and commercial property just because we see the bigger opportunities that are over in that space.
Yeah. So your strategy now is mostly kind of flipping these properties versus buy and hold. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. So whenever we can buy and hold, we will. It's just very hard to find a buy and hold that makes sense for us in this market, especially with rising interest rates and also the cash flow wise. But so whenever we can hold it, we will. But like 90% of our deals we are flipping or selling.
Yeah. Very interesting too, because like, I know you're in a different market as well, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you. A lot of our savvy investors, they are investing in the States. Probably Indianapolis is not one on the radar, but I can guarantee you a lot of people would be very interested in Hawaii, right? But at the same time, it's very expensive, no different than what we're dealing with here in Vancouver and also Toronto, and probably a lot of cases, it's even more expensive than beautiful Hawaii, to be honest with you. So let me ask you is, in some of these markets that we're dealing with here in Canada, we're actually seeing markets depreciating. So it becomes a little bit more challenging to kind of do a BRRRR or to do a flip. Are you seeing that in some of the markets that you're investing in, and how are you mitigating some of that?
So I mean, like we are seeing like a little bit of drop, I think, in the market, even Hawaii as well too. The big thing I think you alluded to earlier is that you always want to have a safety net in your deals, right? And so like if you're buying a property, let's say for $1 million, you're not if it's worth $1 million, you're not going to pay $1 million. You want to pay like 800,000 or something, so you have at least a cushion in there where like you can there's a profit, right? Because the things that I think that's like the beauty of real estate versus like, let's say, stocks or other investments. Like when you buy a stock for like, let's say $100, you always pay market price for that stock, right? You can't pay under market price. But when you buy, like, let's say, real estate for like $100,000, now you can pay like $50,000 for that real estate. You can actually find good deals and have equity built in from day one. So I think when you're investing in real estate, especially in this market, you have to assume that the market's going to go down in the next 6 months to a year, and then run that into your numbers when you're making the deal purchase on the front end. So that just means that you have to do more work on the front end to find great deals where it does make sense, where you can mitigate your risk, and you can do some of like the things that you want to do on the backside of the deal.
Brilliant. Love it. Very good advice. Awesome stuff. So this one's kind of an important one. I kind of already highlighted this a little bit, just kind of sampler earlier on. Financing. Okay, I can't comment what's going on in the States. I'm hearing a lot of mixed things, but I'm going to tell you in Canada, it's becoming more and more challenging. Obviously, interest rates are through the roof compared to what we're used to, right? And so very cyclical part of our business. It's very, very challenging. And the biggest thing that you highlighted too, which I fully agree, is cash flow is becoming so hard to find, right? So there's kind of a two-prong approach that I want to ask you. And number one, you already referenced this, is how did you secure funding or financing during your transition period? And I think you already referenced this, is you kind of set a couple things up in advance before you made the jump. And then the second part, what are kind of some of the creative financing options that you are doing now, just based on your overall business, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so when I first started, I think I talked about how I raised money from like banks using lines of credit, and then also how I did it with like my 401k. So that's how I had like seed money to kind of start with. And then when I was doing the BRRRRs in Indianapolis, I was refinancing using the just local banks. Just regular lenders, using my W-2 as my income. So then like it was very easy to qualify for like the loans on the rental properties in Indianapolis. And I think that was just kind of like that's kind of what got me into the place where I was like cash flowing, but then also where it's like to refinance and to hold those things long term. So I mean, that's kind of how I got started as far as just like the BRRRRs in the very beginning. And then when it came to Hawaii, it was very similar. The only difference was when you're acquiring it, now we're taking a hard money loans, because you can't buy them with, the cash you needed was like a lot more than what we had available. So we're using hard money loans on the front end to acquire them, and just refinancing them with my regular long-term W-2 income on the back end.
Love it. Perfect. That's great advice. Great insight, guys. So I think the biggest thing is learn from some of the lessons that were here. Like, I think at the end of the day, like I said before, not joking, the banks like jobs, and it becomes very, very challenging to get lines of credit, personal lines of credit, as Daniel's referenced as well. And any financing that you're trying to do, get that set up before you make that leap of faith. Again, I know we're all anxious to become full-time investors, but I actually think Daniel nailed this right on the money. Is, you know what? It's still a job. It's a business now that you're running, truthfully. And so you got to be prepared for this kind of stuff. So as you're about to make that transition, you are kind of taking a leap from your current job to maybe a job that you really, really enjoy, which is, I think, Daniel, that's you and myself, both of us included, that we really like what we do here, right? So
yeah, definitely.
Good. So let's talk about one thing, risk management. Ugh, a risky thing. Okay. So real estate in a lot of ways can be a risky endeavor. What are some of the risk management strategies that you employ to protect your investments and even some of your income? What are some of those things that you do?
I think like number one is just running your numbers conservatively. I think a lot of times when I see like newer investors who kind of struggle or to like lose money in the first deal was usually their ARV or the after repair value was wrong. And I think like it's very important to make sure that when you are running your numbers, make sure that you, number one, run them conservatively, assuming that the market's going to go down in the near future. And then like don't just take the advice of like a realtor or wholesaler who's trying to sell you the deal, because your interests are not necessarily aligned with their interests. Like they want to make money from the transaction, but you want to make money from like the longer and the long term, right? So make sure that you run your own numbers, get like a second opinion, and make sure sometimes it's best to just even partner with an experienced investor who can help mitigate your risk. And so when I first started, I was like anti-partnering, anti-education, everything. But in hindsight, if I were to do it again, I would be totally down to like, let's partner with an experienced investor or like pay for education, like just to kind of help me get like started. And I think now we're actually on the backside of this, where we actually will partner with new investors, help them walk them through their first deal and share the profits with them. Or we're also doing some like just helping to coach up the newer guys to kind of help them to like the first beginning phase of making sure that you're running numbers correctly, and you kind of like first see all the things that are going to happen, like holding costs, like overruns and repairs, permitting issues, and then dealing with banks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Beautiful, beautiful. Can you share any lessons learned from kind of, I guess maybe from 2019 to where we're at today? Any major lessons of maybe unexpected challenges? Like I know we're dealing with a little bit of a different market back than 2019, 2020. Some cases that was kind of a little bit of a happy time, and from a real estate investor perspective, anything that has changed or unexpected challenges since you've made the leap that maybe you can help kind of educate some of the people that are considering this?
I'll give you like one small lesson that we learned early on was, and so when we were doing like one of our first birds in Indianapolis, I ran my ARV, right, the after repair value. It's like, hey, I think this property is gonna be worth like about 130 after it's all fixed up and done. And so like just running my analysis, I was pretty sure about that ARV. And so we bought the house for like $70,000. We put $30,000 into it, and we like fixed it up. And then like at the end, we were trying to get the appraiser for the refinance, and then the appraiser came back with the value was $70,000. I was like, this is like, there's like no way it's $70,000. So like I was okay. So now we gotta like figure this out. And so I actually did like a rebuttal. I was like, hey, like can we have like another like can you take another look at this? Here's some comps. Here's some things that, or like I think you might have overlooked. He was actually using some comps that sold like in our neighborhood, but then like there was another company in our neighborhood that sold for like 60 grand. But it was actually on the market now for 150 because another flipper had picked it up, and I was actually like flipping it. But he used like the original sold comp and stuff, right? So like, hey, I think there might be some things you can adjust in your strategy. But I wasn't expecting him to do that. So I was like, okay, maybe he'll come up to like 90 or 100, but you really need this at 130 for it to make sense, right? And so, but just realizing that you can refute appraisals, assuming that you have like your own comps that are legitimate. They can't be like too far away or like a different like the square footage, et cetera, but like they're legitimate comps that you can like kind of produce, then you can like dispute like the appraisals that you get. And so I was thinking, hey, this guy's not going to do it, but we're going to have to ask for another appraiser. If another appraiser doesn't do it, we're going to have to go to another bank and maybe like start the process again in order to get like a higher appraisal. But I was very sure that I think like from my research, like we should be able to appraise at this 130 mark. And so, but Miracle is the guy, kudos to him, honest dude. So he came back and said, actually, no, you're right. And so he appraised it actually at the new appraisal at 140,000. So it was just like it was like from 70,000 to 140,000 just by sending some comps, and it kind of like just like, hey, like, and the big thing is like you never want to make like don't be like an a-hole about it, right? Like you're not trying to make him feel bad or make him look stupid. Just like, hey, like just like always be like helpful and like communicative and just like from a humble standpoint. And it's amazing what guys will do as far as just like trying to help you out on the back end as well too. So that's like a little small tip where as long as you have your comps and your appraisers, then like if you have a low appraisal, you can dispute it and you can get like a higher one.
Love it. That's great advice. And truthfully, for those that are, especially in this environment right now, appraisers are being definitely more cautious in regards to their appraisal numbers, right? And I would probably assume you agree with that, Daniels, because again, if we're seeing especially in some of the markets that we're dealing with, like again, guys from Toronto, Vancouver, they're going to be a little bit more cautious because we're looking at depreciated markets and stuff like that. So just be aware of this. Don't be afraid to challenge. And to your point, your appraiser is still part of your investment team from my perspective. And you know what? Have a very cordial discussion. Show some of your sophistication by bringing some of your own comps. I've done the same thing too, Daniel. I've challenged a lot of comps as well. And you'll be surprised. It's amazing. Sometimes they're just like, yeah, you know what? You're right. It's just being, putting your big boy pants on and showing some respect and making sure that you are also communicating that you're a sophisticated investor, no different than everybody else. So great advice. Thanks for that. Yeah. One that I'll share real quickly just for everybody too, because, both Daniel and I, just talking briefly, we're both kind of in this position of full-time jobs. Like I left my full-time job back in 2008. And if everybody remember what 2008 was like, that wasn't a good time to leave your full-time job because that was a little bit of a challenging time. And, Daniel's advice was quite good is, make sure that you got your income kind of covered off before you make that leap of faith. And I was just getting by before 2008 hit. And trust me, that was a real challenging time, very, very challenging time. So make sure that you are fully covered before you take that leap of faith, to be very, very honest with you. And so it is a lot harder right now. The question, what Daniel's just highlighted is he's identified what his income streams is before he actually made that transition. So make sure you're fully covered off before you take that leap, or else it will be very, very hard for you. So anyway,
it was actually when I did the transition, the goal was, so when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, the goal was get passive income, retire, and live on the beach, right? Like just quit my job and just do nothing. And so I think like when we hit that passive income number and I was ready to just retire and just like leave everything, like I did have the option to just not do any more investing and just retire. But just going through some introspection and just like seeing like what drives you. And like I think that's also another reason why when people retire, they feel like they lose like the purpose in life. I think we were meant to work. And I think like work is healthy and good. And so like when I had the option to just stop working, I came to the conclusion, like, like I like doing something, like I have to do something like purposeful, meaningful, and like add value to the world, or like do something with my hands. And I think if I were to retire, like at that time when my passive income, like I probably would have retired for like 6 months. Like I got super bored. It's like, hey, I gotta like start something brand new. And so it was just like just knowing that as investors or people who are entrepreneurs, is like, it's never about like not working. It's always about like, let's make work optional. So like you don't have to work, but then now you can choose and work at something that you enjoy or what you are passionate or what you want to do. And so I think that's like a big distinction as far as just like when you're setting your goals. And so.
Amen. I love it. In fact, I was talking to a student of mine just beforehand. He's like, Mike, when are you going to retire? I'm like, I just don't see it happening. I actually love the game. It's a fun game. It really is, just the excitement of closing and acquiring deals. It really is an enjoyable thing. And again, you got to have passion for it, exactly like Daniel said. It doesn't really feel like a job, to be honest, right? So, so let me ask you, and this is kind of the big question is, you did this in 3 years. And the big question is, how did you do it, right? And so maybe you can identify some key steps that you took to take you to that full-time business for yourself. You kind of built this from scratch to a full-time career. So maybe you can just kind of identify what were some of those key things that you did in your process, because a lot of people are going to be watching this right now and listening very closely. It's like, okay, I'm Daniel step number 3 right now, or I'm Daniel step number 5 right now. Maybe you can identify some of those key things, those key steps that you took before you made that transition, or to get to that transition.
I think so. I think when you first start investing in real estate, it seems very daunting because there's such a big wealth of knowledge and foundational things you have to build. There's just like education, there's networking, there's so many things that are so much you have to build in the very beginning. It's very hard. And so I think when you first start, you're learning, you're networking, and you're trying to just do all these things, but you're not really going to get a whole lot of traction in the beginning, but you're building a foundation. And so I think for me, when I first started in Indianapolis, it was just building my foundation. So, but massive action and massive focus also play a big role, because when you're when you, let's say you focus work for 8 hours and you're super focused, you probably get it maybe 5 times as much as if you're kind of half focused or kind of dilly-dallying those 8 hours. And so I think if you just focus what you're doing, you're just way more productive on your output and your productivity. And so I think that first year in investing out of state, we did 6 burrs, and all of them were like full birds at the time. But a lot of it was like just a ton of hard work on the front end, like analyzing literally like thousands of deals, like every day, like analyzing like 100 deals, and just like you're just like looking through things, talking to people, like, and then putting like the time, energy, and effort that's needed in order to do those great deals. And so I think like, and then it just kind of snowballs from there. So like the first we started in Indianapolis, started doing like those 6 birds. My original thought was take my skill set to Hawaii, flip some houses. And as opposed to having 150 grand that I can recycle, now I have like 350 grand that I can recycle, and I can buy like 100 units, or like I can buy like 20 or 30 rentals a year as opposed to just the 6 that I did. And so that was the original plan. I got very lucky in Hawaii where I got a few birds right off the bat where the cash flow was really great on the back end. And so that really supercharged my whole like cash flow to kind of like leave my W-2. And so like a little bit of it was just like a massive action on the front end, but also like a little bit of luck and follow and finding these great deals. And then a little bit of just like riding like the appreciation wave of like 2020, 2021, where I was doing the birds in Hawaii and the flipping. And so like we're thinking, hey, we're going to sell this property for like $150,000 profit. Ended up being like $250,000 profit, right? We think like this thing, my biggest deal like that I burned, that the biggest cash flow, I had an ARV of like 1 million. At the end of the deal, it was appraised for 1.2. And so like, that's how I was able to like pull out all my money and then the cash on the back end, et cetera. And so like, we did get a little bit lucky on that rise of like during that COVID, like crazy ramp up, but it was just massive action. And then just constantly like making sure that we find great deals.
Amazing. Love it. Very, very good. Very good stuff. So here's another question I've got for you is this. And this is a challenge for a lot of people is diversification. And it's part of it is diversification in strategy, but the biggest one is diversification in area. So you've gone from Indianapolis over to Hawaii. And for a lot of individuals, that's a tough one because they may live in their own backyard and they just only feel comfortable of this. But that market maybe just doesn't make any sense any longer. And you've gone a different direction. So you start off in Indianapolis and then move to your backyard as well. Maybe you can share a little bit about, any advice for those that are wanting to diversify their area of focus or even their strategy. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
I think like it sounds like there's like 2 separate questions. One question is, actually, is it cool if we keep the screen so we can see both of you, just so I feel like I'm talking to somebody?
Yeah, no problem. Go for it.
So, I mean, it screws me up because I feel like I'm talking to myself. I'm just like, I'm sorry. But so I think there's like kind of like 2 different questions here. One is diversification. The second one is like investing out of your backyard, right? So like, just let me the first one, diversification. This is my personal opinion. I think like diversification is not needed. So like, this is my personal opinion. So I think like it's better to focus on one asset where you know it really well. So like when I went to Indianapolis, like I had to learn every single market, every single street by street, and to build my team, put all my energy and focus into this one market where like just like they're building the relationship with the realtors, with the property managers, with the contractors, and like all that time and energy, and then just knowing the lay of the land. Like if you focus on one market, it's just way easier for you to kind of like have success because there's like a compound effect of all the things that you're doing in that some market. Versus like, let's say I was in Indy, KC, and Hawaii. Now I have to do like 3 sets of contractors, 3 relationships with property managers, 3, and then just like a whole bunch of different things where it's just less focused and it's more like as far as like scattered as far as like knowledge. And even like, let's say like you want to do like real estate and stocks. I mean, nothing wrong with stocks, but then like, let's say you just focus all in on real estate. You're so good at real estate, like your competitive advantage, like really lowers your risk when you're in real estate versus let's say you're doing stocks on the side. Now your risk is higher because you don't understand it as well, right? Or let's just say you just go all in on stocks and you dabble in real estate, you're going to have like more risk on the real estate side because you don't quite understand it as well as if you're whatever your main focus. So for me personally, I think like just like not diversifying as far as just like your market and like your strategy, just like become like absolutely really good at this where like your risk is low because you're so good at this one strategy. That's my personal opinion. I mean, there's lots of different schools of thought and we can have like a longer conversation about this, but I think just as far as just diversification, I'm a big believer of just one market and just like focus all in on that. So
love it. And you've got your team already set up. You're close to where you're at based on where you're located and stuff like that. So great advice. Love it. Perfect. So the one thing that's kind of interesting too is, everybody, you start off kind of with the objectives. Your first goal was to, one of your goals was to become a full-time real estate investor. I'm making an assumption on that. You've accomplished that. What are some of the long-term goals that you have for yourself now as part of your real estate investing career, now that you've accomplished that? maybe you can just share a little bit about what those long-term objectives and maybe even some, retirement planning, wealth preservation. I don't know if you want to highlight some of the next objectives that you've got planned for yourself. So,
yeah, I mean, I think when I first started, it was just like it's like a very like when you're just like kind of just trying to get by, like you have to be selfish, like you have to take care of yourself first, right? I think the whole airplane mask, like when the things drop, take care of your airplane, then you can take care of somebody else's, right? And so in the beginning, I just need to make money, build cash flow, so like me and my family or my wife, we can kind of like coast or survive. But I think as we've had different levels of success, now we have a team underneath us, and like I really want to see my team succeed. Like I want to have them all reach financial freedom. And then also there's just like the bigger, like you, as you grow in the opportunities, more you want to see, like now we're coaching some students, helping them along their journeys. And it's very rewarding. And it's like your reach of what you can accomplish and what you can influence or what you can do expands as you expand as an investor. And so I think it's just the next journey is just, how can we add more value to the world? How can we help other people who are along the journey? Just like yourself, I think like you probably impacted a ton of people from like your multifamily, from your coaching, from like these lives and things. And it's really rewarding. Like when you first started, you're just like, I just need to make money to survive so I can for myself, right? But at a certain point when you have enough, you're like, hey, how can I share this with other people? Because it's been an amazing like vehicle and journey. And it's super rewarding to see other people kind of like succeed or get their first deal, make their first steps toward financial freedom, or kind of like take their journey. So I think for us, it's just, how can we help our team, number one, succeed? How can we help like just the smaller and then maybe the bigger community also come up as well too, and then just do bigger deals and do cooler things. That's like the
100%. Like I know for myself, it's it's kind of giving back a little bit, to be honest with you. Like I do these things, bring in speakers that I really love seeing, because they really are with integrity, and that's the really important part, that when we invite guests out there, is we want to make sure we're bringing people with integrity. But part of our whole approach was give back, share some of the challenging times and issues that have happened, because those are the real lessons, to be honest with you. If we can avoid that one, if I can help support one person from making a mistake that I've done, then it's all worth it, to be honest with you. Because I'm sure in your own journey too, Daniel, you've seen people, especially even right now, there's a lot of challenging times. Let's call a spade a spade. It's not pretty out there. And so with that being said, people that have been doing this a long time can kind of share from past experiences that have ridden the cycle a couple of times, say, hey, try this instead, and then you can hopefully overcome this, right? So it actually kind of goes right to my next question to you is mistakes and mistakes specifically. And is there something specific that maybe people should be aware of, like before they make that transition? I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, but some of those big learnings, was there anything specifically that was a big learning that that you had to overcome through a challenge in your business during that transitionary year?
I mean, like honestly, we were very blessed as far as like the whole transition. It wasn't like a very difficult transition. It was almost like a no-brainer for us, just because my job was holding me back from what I was doing, right? So like, let's say in this job I make like 1x. On my side gig, working 2 months, I'm making 10x. It's almost like, why even do this thing? So like the transition for us it was very easy as far as like the thought process. It was just all the work and the accumulation to kind of get to that point. And I say I was working 40 hours in my job and 40 hours in investing. Honestly, it was like 40 hours here and like 80 hours over here. Like the investing was kind of consumed me as like I eat, sleep, breathe. Like when I go to sleep, I like dream about like in like the deals and things. Like I was just so like focused on just like getting better and like doing deals and like what the things. And so like it was like a healthy, unhealthy obsession depending on your point of view, right? But I was just like so focused on this. And I think like when you can have like your side hustle like would just like make so much on your side hustle that doesn't even make sense to do your main hustle, I think that's like a super like I guess healthy way to kind of transition into quote unquote full-time investing.
Yeah, love it. Very, very good. Great stuff. So one of the things that's obviously popped up since you've started is obviously you started with COVID. So, that's an interesting, it's changed a lot. Let's just call it that, right? So we have 2019 to 2023, things have changed and it's evolved. And so with yourself, I would imagine you've adapted, just like all of us real estate investors. We've had to be very creative, try in some cases change strategies. You made a couple comments, maybe short-term rentals, generate more cash flow. And again, there's all these things that are happening. Just based on current trends, maybe suggestions and advice, how should investors be adapting in current trends today? And maybe some of the things that you've adapted. And I know you already highlighted some of these things, but asked for the Daniel's crystal ball. And again, big caveats. This is Daniel's opinion, and I'm happy to share mine too. But at the end of the day, how are you? What are some recommendations, some things you should be doing or what should investors be doing to kind of adapt to some of these current trends?
I think you touched on this a little while ago, but creative financing is huge. I think even when we were first starting the journey, I think I watched some YouTubes on creative financing, and so we actually were implementing creative financing from the very beginning, but taking over things subject to, especially if someone has a locked-in interest rate, either for a short term or long term. So a lot of our flips were taking over these houses subject to, and then either refinancing them into basically if we're going to keep them. So it's crazy because we're buying them we're assuming them at a 3% loan, right? And then we're refinancing them into 7 or 8% just to keep them long term for ourselves, just so we can put the loan in our name. But I mean, just a lot of times we're assuming them for a short period of time, then we're fixing them up and selling them so that we can actually do the spend less money on holding costs. But just I think having that in your tool belt is really powerful. Having either there's a subject twos, there's novations, there's a few other kind of creative things you can do as far as just on the creative side that. There's a wealth of knowledge available either online or in books or in podcasts where there wasn't available probably 10 years ago. And so I think take advantage of these resources to do things creatively as far as these deal structures. And for residential, it's a lot of people don't. It's just kind of starting. It's kind of starting there. But on the commercial or multifamily side, everybody does something creative. So you're always working with the sellers as far as hey, this lease back for a year, or let's do structure it this way. And so I think when you're working on the commercial side, there's a lot more opportunity to be super creative because you're dealing with another investor who's trying to solve his problem and you're trying to solve your problem, right? So you can kind of come up with a real creative solution to kind of make sure that there's win-wins on both sides, but you can kind of think outside the box a lot more on the commercial side as opposed to the residential side is on the residential side you kind of have to pitch the owner hey. So too, sometimes it's a lot hard for people to grasp or explain, but just making sure it's just having options using your tool belt is just always good to have, I think, as we're in this challenging market.
Love it. And I hope you guys are all paying really close attention to what he just said because he's bang on the money. It's funny because I actually had a student of mine. He just purchased a multifamily. I can't remember how big it is, 20 units or something like that. And with that being said, he got seller financing out of this thing. Are you ready for the number? You ready? 4%. Can you believe in today? That's unheard of, to be very honest with you. But again, this is where, pardon me?
We're getting some at 0%. And so it's when you pitch it, just say hey, we'll pay you just over time and then just principal only and see if and maybe they'll come up to 2 or 4%. So just depending on the sellers, what they're trying to get out of it, if they want to be out, a lot of times they're buying these properties, they're stressed. They just don't want to deal with the headache. It's I just don't want to deal with the headache. I just want to, I want to hit this. And a lot of times it's there's a vanity number. I want $1 million or whatever it is. And so I'll take 0% or whatever. I just want to make sure that I hit my number as opposed to let's do 800,000 at 3% or different things. And so a lot of times you can actually negotiate with the seller, just trying to hit what they want. And they just always start with 0%, that's just a small little advice for people.
Love it. Well, I think we're going to have to hire you, Daniel, to do some of those negotiations, but we love that. That's fantastic. Great advice. As we kind of get closer to the top of the hour here, guys, and I'm just going to ask Daniel one last question for you. And I always like to ask this from our guest speakers is just, final pieces of advice for real estate investors that are maybe considering taking the leap of faith to becoming a full-time real estate investor, and how best to prepare for this transition. Again, what are those last words of wisdom that you wouldn't mind sharing with our community?
I think to me it's just be very conservative. I think that's a huge thing is you never want your first deal to be your last deal. I think that's one thing that I see is people come into the space and they get hyped about it. And then they kind of fudge their numbers to get the deal because they want to do a deal. But then on the back end, they lose money. And then their first deal is their last deal because if you take a huge loss in the very beginning, it just, number one, you're in a hole. Number two, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth and you think it doesn't work, right? So I think even when we started in 2019, we thought we were at the top of the bubble because everyone, I think for 5 years. 2014, everybody, we're at the top of the bubble. 15, 16, every year we're at the top of the bubble. And so we went into the market assuming we're at the top of the bubble. And I think you just always go into the market assuming you're at the top and it's going to go down. And that's, I mean, and it probably will go down over the next year or 2 years. I mean, like, it's hard to say for sure, but like, you're just going to make that assumption that it is going to go down. And that's just an assumption. And so like when you're doing or running your numbers and your deals, be very conservative, and just assume that the market is going to go down. So.
Beautiful. I have the same opinion. Is always plan for worst case scenario. Always. Like it helps protect yourself. And the second part is don't get arrogant too. And I see a lot of that sometimes too. Is it's not about how many doors. It isn't like, it's, you can own 1,000 doors, but if none of them are performing, what's the point? Yeah. So find quality properties, especially during these kind of crazy times as well. Because again, who wants to work on something that's just not hitting your objectives and accomplishing the objectives that you've set for yourself, right? So, yeah. Awesome. 100%. Listen, Daniel, this is great stuff. And I can't thank you again for sharing such valuable information. And I'm sure a lot of the individuals that are watching this right now are getting a ton of this. And now, if somebody wants to learn more about you or follow you and learn more about your investing journey, where should they go? What would you recommend?
You can go to our biggest platform is Instagram. So Instagram at Daniel Kong 808, or on our YouTube channel at Daniel Kong 808. So those are kind of our two main ones. We have like Facebook and TikTok too, but usually Instagram and like our YouTube channel are the two main ways to find us.
Awesome. And what I'll do for those that are watching this right now, I'll add the links to the description in this video as well. But definitely check out his Instagram. It's fantastic. He's got some great information. You can follow his journey. So Daniel, thanks again for sharing your wisdom with our savvy investor community. And again, and spending some time with us versus spending some time at the beautiful beaches of Hawaii as well. We're all just a little bit jealous. That's all it is.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Super appreciate it. And like to all your viewers are lucky to have you as a host, Mike. So
thank you. Appreciate that. So as we conclude, I just want to thank you guys all for joining us. Enjoyed the training session. Again, give us a thumbs up. Make sure that you hit that notification bell as well. And again, subscribe to our Savvy Investor YouTube channel as we continuously update new videos to help support you guys in your real estate investing journey. And for those that are watching the recording, again, please post your questions or comments below. We'll make sure that we respond accordingly. So with that being said, thanks again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you at our next upcoming YouTube Live. Cheers.